Was Brian Walsh a cold-hearted killer, or a loving husband who teared up when he scraped himself on the beach? On this episode of The Searches for Anna Walsh, we're going to hear about the man who stands accused of brutally killing his wife, Anna, from some of the people who knew him best, including from Anna herself. I'm your host, Colton Bradford. Welcome back. Now, before we get to all of that, let's start off with some recent updates on Brian Walsh's legal troubles. March 4th was a busy day for Walsh and for his legal team. His murder case had its first update in months, just a status conference at Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham. And Walsh is now being represented in this case by Larry Tipton. Mr. Tipton is a well-known Massachusetts defense attorney, and he's no stranger to some high-profile cases. He actually just represented Emmanuel Lopes, who was found guilty in the same courtroom where Walsh will be tried, of first and second-degree murder for killing a Weymouth police sergeant and a 77-year-old bystander in 2018. Now, Tipton was appointed as Walsh's lawyer back in December by the court, after the attorney who'd represented him in the early days of the case, Tracy Minor, withdrew. The judge actually noted at that time that Walsh could no longer afford her representation. In this March 4th hearing, it was quick, just a brief update in court on where the case stood. Walsh didn't have to attend, though Tipton was there. He said he still needed to go over all the evidence in the case, and prosecutors said some DNA testing was still pending.
So we're kind of at a standstill as far as testing at Bodie, but criminalistics is done at the lab, and we'll probably be doing DNA testing at the state lab as well.
We didn't learn when the trial will start, only that lawyers are due back in court in May.
Talked about May 1st being a status date.
Okay. Does that date work, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
5/1, 2 p.m.
But there was arguably a bigger update on that Monday in Walsh's other big legal issue, the Andy Warhol art fraud case that we told you about in this last episode. Attorney Tracy Minor, who's actually still representing Walsh in that case, filed an appeal to the 37-month prison sentence a federal judge handed him. So that case now heads to the Federal Court of Appeals. While we wait for Walsh's cases to move forward in the federal and state justice systems, there's still so much to uncover about Anna Walsh's disturbing killing and the man allegedly behind it. Brian Walsh has been called a sociopath, a con man, even evil, but also a man with a troubled past, wanting to do better for himself and his children. Today, we're diving deeper to find out who is Brian Walsh. When the Walsh murder case was first developing in January of 2023, our news team got to work, not only following the daily twists in the search for Anna, but also trying to learn new information about who the Walshes were and what could have led to this. Were they having marital problems, financial issues? Did Brian have a criminal record? Anything to provide context to a mysterious and chilling turn of events.
Well, questions are definitely mounting tonight, especially after a fire at a home that used to belong to Anna Walsh.
We uncovered two court cases with public documents, like letters and affidavits, that gave an inside look at the dealings, tendencies, and personality of Brian Walsh. And it was striking, though, to see how polarizing the descriptions of him in these court documents were. And we should point out, we haven't had a chance to hear from him directly yet, though we're still trying.
Brian has a big heart.
The first set of documents we're going to look into is the art fraud scheme that we detailed in episode 2. The one where Brian sold phony Andy Warhol paintings and cost victims hundreds of thousands of dollars. Brian pleaded guilty in April of 2021, and while his sentencing was supposed to happen several months later, it ended up being postponed for an investigation into whether Brian violated his conditions of release, and if he was correctly reporting his finances. Leading up to that original 2021 sentencing date, his wife Anna wrote a letter to the judge supporting her husband. She painted a picture of a dedicated partner, a loving father, and a man who was remorseful for his actions, and she referred to the emotional challenges from his childhood and his parents. Here's NBC Tim Boston senior assignment editor Debbie King reading some excerpts from Anna's letter.
Brian and I met back in 2008 when I worked at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts. It was love at first sight for me, and I feel the same way about Brian to this day. When I met Brian, I witnessed his kindness and generosity on many occasions. However, I also saw the level of suffering in his life. He was afraid of relationships and for years did not allow anyone to get close to him, including me. Brian was deeply affected by his childhood and relationship with his parents. He was taught to lie and hide. He was told that he was a loser, that his parents should not have had him, A deep feeling of shame governed his life. The boys loved spending time with Brian. Being the cook in the family, our sons often request Brian's special pasta dish, which they love, or his French toast. Brian fully supports me with my work. Brian has a big heart, and he is impacting everyone around him in ways that will surpass the present moment.
Those are just a few of the lines from the lengthy letter that Anna wrote about her husband, just a little over a year before he would allegedly kill her. She also said that Brian had unbearable pain and sadness at the thought of how much he hurt others in his year-long art scheme. It was a stark contrast to what one victim in that case had to say about Brian.
His personality changed.
Ron Rivlin is an LA-based art dealer who was one of the buyers who fell for Brian's fake Warhols. We heard from Rivlin's 2023 interview with our sister station WRC in the last episode. He said he saw Brian as a, quote, calculated guy with no sense of accountability or compassion toward the victims in the case. Here's more from Rivlin's interview, describing the difference in Brian before the sale of the fake painting and after Rivlin realized that he had been duped.
He was well put together. He was articulate. He was transparent. He gave me all the documents. I verified all the documents. I did, my due diligence on him. I saw, the deed where he lived and that he lived in a $6 million townhouse on the water there. He came from a wealthy family. I had no concerns over his character at the time. It was when I received the paintings and saw they were forgeries that his personality changed. That's when I couldn't reach him. And that's when I, reached out to Anna. And Anna was, instrumental in getting him to reach out to me and try and find a resolution. But it was all very kind of coerced. I think he was a newlywed at the time, and I'm not sure that Anna knew about that there were forgeries involved. I think she thought that they were real paintings, and she was just helping Brian in the sale.
We'll be right back with more insight into Brian's character from a different legal case. Welcome back to the searches for Anna Walsh. Brian Walsh had a fractured relationship with his father. He grew up an only child. Brian wrote in court affidavits that his father walked out on his mom when he was a kid. But according to friends of his father, Brian would steal nearly $1 million from his own dad in a real estate deal. Producer Matt Fortin is going to walk us through what he learned from poring through all these court documents.
There is a wealth of information in this case, which was filed in 2019 in Plymouth County Probate Court. The case file shares statements from 4 people. Andrew Walsh is a nephew of Brian Walsh's father, Dr. Thomas Moorcraft Walsh III. It also has statements from 2 of Dr. Walsh's closest friends and Brian himself. Walsh's father was a well-respected doctor. In fact, the Division of General Neurology at Brigham and Women's Hospital is named after him. Walsh III wrote a book on neurology in elderly people, taught the anatomy of neurology at Harvard Medical School, and served on Brigham's influential Institutional Review Board, according to a tribute posted on the hospital's website. The page concludes he was a unique and charismatic personality with many diverse interests. He was a gifted neurologist, and the division was named for him to honor his many contributions. In this probate court case, Andrew and the 2 friends were at odds with Brian over who was entitled to Dr. Walsh's assets following his death in 2018. Brian claimed there was no valid will left by his father. The close friends and Dr. Walsh's nephew claimed that there was a will, and it excluded Brian. They speculated he may have even destroyed it. They claimed that Brian was estranged from his father after stealing nearly $1 million from him from a real estate deal involving a house in Lenox, Massachusetts. Brian was said to have purposefully removed himself from his father's life after stealing that money. That's why Andrew and the friends of Dr. Walsh objected when Brian allegedly began emptying his late father's home in Hull of expensive carpets and artwork and staging it to go on sale. Listen to this as NBC 10 Boston anchor Raul Martinez reads an excerpt from the affidavit of Dr. Fred Pescatone, a close friend to Dr. Tom Walsh for nearly 30 years.
I witnessed firsthand what Brian was capable of. I saw Brian attempt to smuggle out antiquities from China. When Brian was confronted, he picked up a stanchion and literally attempted to kill 4 or 5 guards that had come to talk to him about his crime. Brian is not only a sociopath, but also a very angry and physically violent person. I want nothing to do with him, but will stand up for my friend Tom's rights and will not let his memory be the pack of lies from Brian.
By the way, this is one of the accusations made in public documents and widely reported that we're still hoping to ask Walsh about. Brian argued in this case that it would have been impossible for his father to write and sign off on a will in 2016 due to health problems related to a stroke he had. Brian said that he and his father had mended their relationship after years of estrangement because of a, quote, alternative lifestyle that his father left his marriage for. Brian said he and his son were the only rightful heirs to Dr. Walsh's estate. The 3 other affidavits characterized Brian's statements as lies and misrepresentations. They said that there was a will, one that excluded Brian and benefited other family members who needed the money. The case over Dr. Walsh's estate ended with the nephew, Andrew Walsh, who claimed to have a close relationship with Dr. Walsh and to have been named executor of the estate by his uncle, prevailing. He sold Dr. Walsh's home in Hull in 2020.
And by the way, we've reached out to Walsh's new court-appointed attorney, and we haven't heard back yet, but we hope to talk to him or even Walsh himself for a later episode. We'll be right back. Welcome back. There were other people outside of family and close friends who shared what Brian Walsh was like, especially as scrutiny on the case increased. On January 10th, 2023, just days into the search for Anna, and before Brian Walsh was charged with murder, our reporter Abby Nesgoda interviewed a couple, Mandy and Mike Silva, who rented from Brian and Anna Walsh in Revere and considered them friends. Abby asked Mike Silva if he believed Brian was capable of harming someone.
To be honest with you, when I was working at his house, I got a little injury on my hand. I broke my hand. Brian fell like on the beach, had a little scrape, and he cried like a little baby. I don't think Brian's capable of injuring anybody. He couldn't even carry groceries into the house. My workers and I had to carry groceries into the house. His Anna used to mow the lawn. Like, he didn't carry anything.
The Silvas told us a lot about the Walshes. Mike said he'd actually been in the basement at their Cohasset home, where police would later find blood and a damaged knife. The couples had talked on December 27th, according to the Silvas. Prosecutors would later say that was the same day Brian searched online for the best state where a man can get a divorce. Not that Mandy Silva would have known that.
It really makes you question, like, wow, you're 2 different people.
And when was the last time either of you heard from
From her was the 28th or the 29th.
And what
I did text her on New Year's to say Happy New Year. And I did text Brian on New Year's to say Happy New Year. He didn't text me back till the 2nd saying, Happy New Year, sorry, I misplaced my phone and my son found it.
Okay.
And then haven't heard anything after that.
When Abby talked to the Silvas weeks later in an exclusive interview, they said they felt haunted by those memories.
And now you look back at those memories and you wonder, did I not read between the lines? Did I miss something?
Soon, on the searches for Anna Walsh, we're going to hear much more about who Anna Walsh was. But coming up on the next episode, Abby and some of the other people on our news team will recount what it was like tracking this case as it broke. From a search that seemed to shift at a moment's notice to a heartbroken community and family when a worst-case scenario was realized.
When you hear of a mother of 3 who just goes missing, my gut told me something's wrong.
As always, if you want to follow the Walsh case with us, subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts and leave us a review to help others find the show too. This episode was produced by Matt Fortin and Julia Yohe, executive produced by Asher Klein and Mark Fortier, with thanks to Jason Gitlin at WRC-TV in Washington for his help. I'm Colton Bradford.